At the same time, you see this man right here, that's Secretary of State Marco Rubio. He's also answering lawmaker questions specific to U.S. policy towards Venezuela. One question posed by some in Congress, whether President Trump's military operation capturing Nicolás Maduro amounts to an act of war. Listen.
It's hard for us to conceive that an operation that lasted about 4.5 hours and was a law enforcement operation to capture someone we don't recognize as a head of state, indicted in the United States, wanted with a $50 million bounty.
My question would be, if it only took 4 hours to take our president, it's very short, nobody dies on the other side, nobody dies on our side, it's perfect. Would it be an act of war?
We just don't believe that this operation comes anywhere close to the constitutional definition of war.
But would it be an act of war if someone did it to us? Nobody dies, few casualties, they're in and out. Boom, it's a perfect military operation. Would that be an act of war? Of course it would be an act of war. I'm probably the most anti-war person in the Senate, and I would vote to declare war if someone invaded our country and took our president.
So you hear the heat there. CBS News congressional correspondent Nikole Killion live on Capitol Hill watching this exchange in real time. What else are you hearing from lawmakers, Nikole?
Well, obviously, this was a significant and substantive hearing from the standpoint of this was really the first public testimony that we have heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Obviously, he has been up here a number of times briefing lawmakers behind closed doors in classified settings, but this is the first time that lawmakers could actually ask him questions in public about that operation at the outset of this year where the former Venezuelan leader Nicolás Maduro was captured. Now, again, Secretary of State Marco Rubio continued to argue that this was a very targeted surgical operation that was really designed to assist law enforcement. He was pressed by many lawmakers in terms of why they weren't necessarily given a heads up about this operation. Obviously, many of them spoke to him in the immediate aftermath, but he argued that the conditions really had to align there in order to successfully carry out this mission. He also continued to insist that U.S. forces are not on the ground in a substantive capacity, that he believes that even though the administration is currently working with Delcy Rodriguez, who is part of the Maduro regime, that ultimately he believes they'll be able to get cooperation from them, although he did say that the U.S. wouldn't potentially rule out a future use of force if they don't get maximum cooperation. So some lawmakers pressed the secretary on that. And then also we heard from some lawmakers who still want some type of timetable in terms of what the U.S. involvement and commitment will be in Venezuela, not only in terms of currently working with the interim government, but also with respect to oil sales, how the oil industry is being handled there. So still a lot of questions that lawmakers have in light of this hearing, but at the same time, many of them grateful for the opportunity to question the secretary publicly on these matters.
Okay, fascinating on that note, but also let's set that aside and talk about the discussion about the man who is accused of assaulting Congresswoman Ilhan Omar during that town hall yesterday. There's a lot of discussion on Capitol Hill, Nikole, about lawmaker safety. When I look at that video, I know I wasn't in the room, but I'm kind of surprised that this man was able to get so close to her, to spray that substance on her. What are you learning about the incident? And really, are any other lawmakers on Capitol Hill stepping forward and having that conversation about safety?
Well, I think we've been having that conversation, Reed, for many months, if not years now. Obviously, It was heightened in light of another incident in Minnesota. Of course, you'll remember last summer with that incident where some Minnesota state lawmakers were unfortunately fatally killed, some wounded as well, in light of political violence that we have seen in this country. And just last night, in fact, the U.S. Capitol Police released a new report where they noted that there have been nearly 15,000 threats that they have investigated against members of Congress, which is significantly up from past years, at least 1.5 times or nearly 1.5 times the number of threats that we have seen in previous years. So from that standpoint, it is and does continue to be a concern that many members have. We just saw over the weekend Florida Congressman Maxwell Frost that he was punched in the face. So a lot of lawmakers continue to be concerned about their safety safety and security, not only when they're at events, but also on Capitol Hill. We did see an increase in security funding in the last government funding bill, and there have been some enhancements that have been made, more resources offered to members to get personal security. But Congresswoman Omar, for her part, certainly says that it remains undeterred in terms of her work there in her district, calling herself a survivor. And obviously, as we saw, in the case of this town hall last night, she continued to go even after that incident involving the man in question there.
Nikole Killion, live on Capitol Hill. Thank you so much. Always great talking to you.